The Galactic Grand Assembly was in full swing, held once every few years to discuss the future of the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of alien species, each with its own unique technologies, cultures, and histories, gathered in the vast conference hall of the Citadel, a neutral station in the center of the galaxy. It was the largest meeting of its kind, a place where intergalactic issues were debated and important decisions were made. Today, the galaxy's most urgent issue was the rise of the Vorger Dominion, a warlike empire expanding its control across nearby star systems. The Dominion's rapid advance had already left many planets devastated, and the Assembly had spent weeks discussing possible strategies to stop them. Some proposed forming a united fleet of their mightiest warships. Others suggested diplomatic efforts to persuade the Dominion to stop their aggression. But the question on everyone's mind was, how could they stop the Dominion before they became an unstoppable force? And then it was humanity's turn. The human representative, Captain Elias Carter, stepped forward in the crowded hall. His face was calm, but inside, he felt a nervous excitement. This was humanity's first appearance at such a prestigious event. Earth had only recently gained the trust of the Galactic Council, and many species still looked down on humans, seeing them as a young and untested race. Some didn't even take their presence seriously. Elias cleared his throat and began to speak. "Honorable representatives," he started, his voice steady and confident, "we may not have the largest fleets or the most advanced weapons, but we are not without resources. We have prepared a fleet of our own, small but highly capable." At his words, a wave of quiet laughter rippled through the assembly. The idea of a tiny fleet to challenge the might of the Vorger Dominion seemed almost laughable to the assembled species. Their fleets consisted of enormous, heavily armed ships capable of destroying entire planets, and here, humans were offering a fleet that could barely be considered a speck on the galactic scale. One alien from the Terran species, with shimmering blue skin and a long flowing mane, raised a hand and spoke in a smooth voice. "A tiny fleet, you say? Surely, you jest, Captain Carter. We have seen the power of the Dominion. A handful of ships from your kind will not change the tide of war." Other representatives nodded in agreement, their expressions filled with skepticism. The idea of humanity's small fleet facing the mighty Dominion was something none of them could take seriously. Elias's gaze swept across the room. He could see the doubts in their eyes, the disbelief. But he didn't flinch. He had expected this reaction. Human history was filled with instances where they had been underestimated, and time again, they proved their strength not by size, but by their willpower and creativity. This, he knew, was no different. "We have our methods," Elias continued. "Our fleet is small, but it is designed for agility, speed, and precision. The Dominion may have powerful weapons, but they are not invincible. We intend to strike where it hurts the most, with calculated, well-timed strikes. Our strategy is not brute force, but intelligence and innovation." The room fell silent for a moment as the alien representatives exchanged glances. Many of them were still laughing silently, but one alien seemed to be taking the human captain more seriously. Kira, a young representative from the Curry species, leaned forward in her seat. Her eyes, glowing softly, watched Elias intently. Unlike the others, she didn't dismiss him outright. There was something about his confidence that piqued her curiosity. "You believe you can defeat the Vorger Dominion with these tactics?" Kira asked, her voice smooth and calm. Elias met her gaze and nodded. "We do. We've been in situations like this before. We've faced powerful enemies, but we've always found a way to win. We won't give up. We can't afford to." Kira studied him for a moment longer. The other representatives had returned to their discussions, dismissing the human proposal as unrealistic. But Kira wasn't so quick to judge. She had heard about humanity's past victories, about how they had faced challenges that seemed impossible and emerged stronger. There was something in their spirit, something that the other species lacked. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she was intrigued. Captain Elias Carter finished his speech, and the assembly moved on to the next agenda item. But in that moment, something had changed. Though most of the delegates still mocked the idea of humanity's tiny fleet, a few were starting to look at humans in a new light. Maybe they were more than just a small species with big dreams. Perhaps their strength lay in their resourcefulness and willingness to fight against all odds. As the meeting drew to a close, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's true test was just beginning. The laughable tiny fleet might not have been taken seriously today, but he knew the time would come when those same representatives would have to eat their words. The fate of the galaxy rested on the unexpected shoulders of the human fleet, and they would rise to the challenge. That he was certain of. Back aboard the USS Resolute, Captain Elias Carter stood in front of his crew, his mind racing with the weight of what lay ahead. The Resolute was humanity's flagship, a sturdy ship with an advanced stealth system, but it was far from the size and power of the gargantuan warships belonging to the other galactic species. Yet Elias had something they didn't: creativity, strategy, and a fleet of ships built for precision. The human fleet wasn't designed for direct confrontation with massive enemy forces. Instead, they were built to be fast and stealthy, able to slip through enemy defenses and strike at the heart of their enemies before they had time to react. It was a fleet of surprises, designed for the kind of warfare that relied on cunning over brute strength. "We may be small," Elias said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "But what we lack in size, we make up for in agility. Our fleet might be the underdog, but that's never stopped us before." He turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Harper, who stood at the front of the command room with a holographic map projected in front of her. The map displayed the galactic sector where the Vorger Dominion was concentrating its forces. Red dots blinked across the map, each one representing a different enemy fleet. It was an intimidating sight, but Elias had seen worse. "We've gathered intelligence," Lieutenant Harper said, tapping the map to highlight specific points. "The Vorger don't use stealth. Their ships are heavily armed, but they're predictable. They rely on their size and firepower to overwhelm their enemies. But they're not prepared for a fleet that doesn't play by the same rules." Elias nodded, understanding the strategy. They couldn't match the Vorgar ship for ship, but they didn't need to. Instead, humanity's ships would slip past enemy lines, hitting them from unexpected angles and disappearing before the Vorgar could react. The key was surprise: attack fast, attack hard, and leave before the enemy had a chance to retaliate. "We've also got the advantage of having smaller ships," Harper continued. "The Vorgar fleet is large and cumbersome. It takes them time to change course, while we can move quickly. They might have more firepower, but we have speed on our side." Elias looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his officers. They had trained for this moment for months, preparing for the fight they knew was coming. It wasn't going to be easy, but they were ready. Each of them had seen humanity's resilience in action, and they all believed in the plan. "Captain," said Lieutenant Zane, the pilot of the Resolute, speaking up from the back of the room, "we've got a few more tricks up our sleeve that the Vorgar won't see coming." Elias turned to Zane, who was grinning from ear to ear. "What do you mean?" Zane tapped a few buttons on his console, and a new set of holographic displays appeared. These were not just standard ship movements or trajectories, but something far more advanced: human-made cloaking devices, special electromagnetic pulses, and high-frequency disruptors. All of these were designed to confuse, disable, or simply disappear from the enemy sensors. "These babies will make us nearly invisible to the Vorgar," Zane explained. "We'll hit them before they even know we're there. And by the time they try to retaliate, we'll already be gone." Harper nodded in agreement. "It's the perfect strategy to disrupt their coordination. The key is to keep them guessing. If they can't track us, they won't be able to respond in time." Elias studied the map once more, his mind running through the possibilities. The Vorgar were ruthless, and they had a great deal of firepower. But they were used to winning through strength. They never expected their enemies to outthink them. Humanity's strength lay in their ability to think outside the box, to use their brains when others relied solely on their brawn. The plan was coming together, but there were still risks. If the humans were caught in the open, they would be outmatched. But Elias believed that the element of surprise was their greatest weapon. "What about our allies?" Elias asked. "Are they on board with the plan?" Harper's face turned serious. "They're not sure about us yet, sir. They've agreed to send support, but they want us to prove ourselves first. Some of the species don't believe we can make a difference, but we're not asking for their trust. We're going to earn it." Elias clenched his fists, looking out the window at the stars. "Then we'll show them what humanity is capable of. We've always been the underdog, and we've always come out on top. Now's our chance to prove it again." The crew fell silent, each person reflecting on the task ahead. They were about to face an enemy far stronger than themselves, but they would do it their way, through skill, strategy, and the unyielding belief that no challenge was too great for humanity to overcome. As the Resolute powered up, ready to lead the small human fleet into the unknown, Elias looked at his officers one last time. "Let's show them that even the smallest fleet can change the course of the galaxy." And with that, humanity's first true test in the Galactic Assembly had begun. The odds were against them, but if history had taught them anything, it was that humans had a way of turning the impossible into the inevitable. The human fleet, though small in numbers, was a force to be reckoned with. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the UNS Resolute, his eyes fixed on the vast expanse of space ahead. The fleet had quietly assembled, hidden behind a large asteroid field just outside the Vorger Dominion's territory. The enemy had no idea they were there, waiting and watching. The first step of the plan was simple: infiltrate. Humanity's small ships had been equipped with advanced cloaking devices that made them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The key to victory lay in the element of surprise. "We're ready," said Lieutenant Harper, who was manning the tactical console. "We have full cloaking, and the pulse disruptors are primed. The Vorger won't see us coming." Elias nodded. "Good. Once we slip past their outer defenses, we hit their supply lines. We need to cripple their ability to resupply, to slow them down." Zane, the Resolute's pilot, spoke up. "I've calculated the approach. We'll move in low and fast, using the asteroid belt as cover. They won't even know we're there until it's too late." The small fleet, consisting of 5 human ships, each with its own specialized role, prepared to launch. These were not massive warships, but stealthy, fast-moving vessels, each equipped with precision weapons designed to take out specific targets. The plan was to strike at the heart of the Vorger's supply chain: supply ships, storage facilities, and anything that could delay their war machine. As the fleet moved out of hiding, the vastness of space seemed to shrink. The ships glided silently, their cloaking devices keeping them hidden from the watchful eyes of the Vorger's patrols. The crew aboard the Resolute could feel the tension in the air. This was the moment of truth. "We're in position," Zane reported. His hands moved quickly over the controls, guiding the Resolute into position. "On your mark, Captain." Elias took a deep breath, his voice steady. "Let's do this." With a slight nod from Elias, the ships sprang into action. The human fleet, though small, was a blur of motion, darting toward their targets like shadows in the dark. Each ship had been trained to execute its strike precisely, without hesitation. Harper watched the tactical displays closely. "Target 1 is locked. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The Resolute fired a precision missile at a large Vorger supply ship. The missile struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling the ship's engines in an instant. The Vorger had no time to react. In a matter of moments, the human fleet had turned a massive ship into a helpless hulk, drifting in space. "First target down," Harper said with a smile, though her focus never wavered. Moving to the next. The other ships were already making their moves. One ship targeted a nearby storage facility, knocking out its defenses and causing an explosion that rippled through the facility. Another ship struck a communication relay, sending a shockwave of interference across the Vorger fleet. The more they struck, the more chaotic the Vorger's response became. The Vorger Dominion, used to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, had never faced an opponent like this. The humans were not engaging in a traditional battle. Instead, they were like ghosts in the night, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could retaliate. "We're making progress, but we're not done yet," Elias said. "Target their fuel depots next. If we can cut off their fuel supply, they'll be stuck in deep space, unable to resupply or move forward." Zane nodded. "On it, Captain. I'll take us to the next target." The human fleet moved quickly from one target to the next, leaving a trail of confusion in their wake. The Vorger, who had once laughed at the idea of a tiny fleet taking them on, were now scrambling to respond. Their communications were in disarray, and their fleets had no idea where the next strike would come from. "We've hit all our targets," Harper reported, her voice tinged with excitement. "We've taken out their supply ships, fuel depots, and communication relays. They're blind and stranded." Elias couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. The plan had worked. The small human fleet, though outgunned and outnumbered, had struck the Vorger Dominion where it hurt the most. But there was no time to rest. "We need to get out of here," Elias said. "We've caused enough chaos for one day. Let's head back to the asteroid field before they regroup." Zane's hands were already moving over the controls. "I'm on it, Captain. Getting us out of here. Fast." The human ships, though small and vulnerable, were quick to disappear into the cover of the asteroid belt. The Vorger, still reeling from the sudden strikes, had no idea where to look next. They were scattered, confused, and far from ready for a counterattack. Back aboard the Resolute, Elias stood tall as his crew let out relieved sighs. They had done it. They had struck a blow against a much larger, more powerful force, and they had done it on their own terms. The first strike was a success, but Elias knew this was just the beginning. The Vorger would come for them. They would retaliate. But humanity had already shown the galaxy that they were more than just an underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with. And the Resolute had only just begun to make its mark. The human fleet had barely escaped the chaos they had created. The asteroid field now hid them from the glaring eyes of the Vorgar warships. Captain Elias Carter stood at the command center of the UNS Resolute, looking out into the endless space. His mind raced as he replayed the events of the previous strike. It had been a success, but it was only the first round in a much bigger game. "We've done well," Elias said, breaking the silence. "But this isn't over. They'll retaliate. The Vorger don't take kindly to being embarrassed." Lieutenant Harper, standing by the tactical console, nodded. "I'm already tracking their movements, Captain. They're gathering their forces. It's only a matter of time before they send out a counterstrike." Elias knew Harper was right. The Vorger were not the kind of species to let an attack go unanswered. They would come at the humans with everything they had. It was only a matter of when, not if. Zane, the ship's pilot, was already at his station. He glanced at Elias. "We need to keep moving, Captain. We can't stay in one place for too long. We've stirred the hornet's nest. They'll be hunting us soon." Elias didn't need to be told twice. "Get us out of here, Zane. Head for the next sector. We need to stay ahead of them." Zane's fingers flew across the controls, and the Resolute slowly shifted course, its engines humming softly as it began to make its way toward a new, more distant location. The rest of the fleet followed closely behind, ready for whatever came next. The stars outside seemed peaceful, but Elias knew the calm wouldn't last. The Vorger were coming. And this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. Hours passed, and the human fleet drifted through the darkness, moving from one hiding place to the next. The crew remained tense, each person knowing that they were playing a dangerous game, but there was no turning back. They couldn't afford to. "I'm reading them," Harper said, her voice tight with concentration. "The Vorgar are close. They're assembling a massive force, bigger than anything we've faced so far." Zane's eyes were focused on the display. "We don't have the firepower to match that. We need a new plan, and fast." Elias took a deep breath. The Vorgar were about to strike with everything they had, and the human fleet would need to be clever if they hoped to survive. They couldn't outrun them forever. They had to stand their ground, at least for now. "We'll make them underestimate us again," Elias said. "We'll use their strength against them. We can't beat them in a head-to-head fight, but we can outsmart them. We've done it once, and we can do it again." Harper turned to him, her expression sharp. "What's your plan, Captain?" "We're going to lure them into a trap," Elias said, a quiet confidence settling over him. "We'll lead them into an area where their numbers and firepower won't matter. We've got the stealth. They don't." Zane raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of using the asteroid fields again?" Elias nodded. "Exactly. We'll lead them through a narrow passage, right into an asteroid field. We'll make sure they think we're cornered, with no place to run. But once they're in, we'll hit them from every angle. They won't know which way is up." Harper looked at the map, considering the plan. "It's risky. If they realize it's a trap too early, we'll be surrounded with no way out." Elias looked around at his crew. They had taken risks before, and each time, they had come out on top. This wouldn't be any different. "We'll make it work," Elias said. "We have to. We can't afford to give them the chance to strike first. We move now." The human fleet began to move again, the Resolute leading the way. The stars outside seemed to move slower now, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Every crew member knew the stakes. If the plan failed, they would be facing the full might of the Vorgar Dominion with nowhere to run. Harper kept an eye on the enemy's movements. The Vorgar were getting closer. She could almost feel their anger in the void of space. They were about to walk right into the trap. "There's the passage," Zane said, his voice steady. "They're right on our tail. Get ready." Elias gave one last look at his officers. "This is it. Stay sharp." The human ships entered the narrow passage between two massive asteroids, the perfect place to set the trap. The Resolute was at the front, its cloaking system keeping it hidden from the enemy sensors. The Vorgar warships, massive and unwieldy, followed closely behind, unaware of the danger they were walking into. "Let's do this," Elias said under his breath. As soon as the Vorgar fleet entered the narrow corridor, the trap was sprung. The human ships, hidden in the shadows of the asteroids, fired on the unsuspecting enemies from every direction. The first few shots struck true, knocking out a few of the Vorgar's smaller vessels before they even knew what was happening. Chaos erupted. The Vorgar ships, disoriented and surrounded, fired wildly, trying to defend themselves, but it was too late. The human fleet had the upper hand, and they were using it to their advantage. Elias watched from the bridge as the plan unfolded. It was working. For now, the human fleet had the advantage, and the Vorgar were beginning to panic. The battle was far from over, but the humans had shown once again that they could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast even the most formidable of enemies. The human fleet had taken the first step in a battle they knew could decide their survival. The Vorgar had been blindsided, their pride bruised, but the war was far from over. As the human ships darted through the asteroid field, evading their larger foes, Captain Elias Carter stared at the stars ahead, calculating every move. "We've taken down a few of their ships," Lieutenant Harper reported, her voice calm but serious. "But they're not backing down. The Vorgar are regrouping. They're calling for reinforcements." Elias knew the Vorgar wouldn't give up so easily. The attack had been a victory in the moment, but the warship's tactical advantage was still in the hands of the aliens. The real test was yet to come. "We need to buy more time," Elias said, his voice steady but full of urgency. "Zane, get us to the Nebula. We'll use the ion storm as cover. We'll make them chase us into it." Zane, always the quickest to respond, didn't hesitate. "Aye, Captain. We're on course. The Nebula should be just ahead." The Resolute's engines hummed as Zane navigated the ship through the winding paths of the asteroid field. The other human ships followed, staying close but careful. If they moved too quickly, they could draw unwanted attention. If they moved too slowly, the Vorgar would catch up. Elias's mind raced. They were running low on fuel and supplies. A direct confrontation with the Vorgar was no longer an option. They couldn't win that battle. But the Nebula, dense, electrically charged, and nearly impossible to navigate, could offer them a temporary refuge. The ion storm within it would disrupt the Vorgar sensors, giving the humans a chance to strike back. "I've got eyes on the incoming fleet," Harper called from her station. "They're closing in fast. They'll be within range in about 20 minutes. The clock was ticking. Elias clenched his fists at his side. The Vorgar were relentless. They knew that if they wiped out the human fleet, it would be a massive victory. They had no idea what they were walking into, though. The Nebula was a deadly place for anyone unfamiliar with its shifting storms and unpredictable currents. Zane's voice broke through Elias's thoughts. "We're entering the Nebula now. The ion storm is active. Should make it harder for them to track us." Elias nodded. "Good. Let's use it to our advantage." They entered the dense cloud of gas and dust, the stars outside fading into a swirling mass of colorful nebulae. The Resolute rocked slightly, the ion storm's energy playing with the ship's systems. It was strange to feel so disoriented in the middle of space, but Elias trusted his crew. They'd handled worse. As they drifted deeper into the nebula, Elias gave the order to scatter. "We'll split the fleet, keep tight, but stay on different courses. If we can confuse them long enough, we might get a chance to disable their command ship." Lieutenant Harper looked at him with a mixture of doubt and hope. "Do you think it'll work, Captain?" Elias met her gaze. "It has to." For a moment, the human ships were silent, their cloaking devices activated and their engines humming softly. Each ship took a different path, weaving through the swirling clouds of gas and charged particles. It was an intricate dance, a test of timing and precision. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. In the distance, Elias could see the shadows of the Vorgar ships creeping closer. Their sensors were already struggling to lock onto the smaller human vessels. The Nebula was working, but the Vorgar were fast learners. Elias knew it wouldn't be long before they adapted. "Captain, I'm reading a large ship on the scanners," Harper said urgently. "It's a Vorgar dreadnought. It's entering the Nebula, and it's fast. They're closing in on us." Elias's stomach dropped. The dreadnought was the largest of the Vorgar ships, capable of destroying smaller ships with a single blow. It was their command center, and if the humans didn't find a way to stop it, they would lose this fight. "We can't let them get that close," Elias said, his voice sharp. "Prepare to engage. We're going to hit them hard and fast, and we're going to do it before they figure out where we are." The crew of the Resolute moved swiftly, their actions synchronized from years of training and experience. Zane adjusted the ship's course to cut across the dreadnought's path. As they came within range, Elias's heart raced. This was it. "Now," Elias barked. "Fire everything we've got." The Resolute opened fire, the energy blasts lighting up the nebula like fireworks. The shots found their mark on the dreadnought, tearing into its hull. The ship rocked, its engines sputtering as the shields began to buckle under the pressure. The human fleet followed suit, launching their own attacks. But it wasn't enough. The Vorgar's massive ship had powerful shields and armor, and it retaliated with a devastating counterstrike. A series of blasts rocked the Resolute, and Elias felt the impact jolt through the ship. "We need to pull back," Zane shouted. "The dreadnought's shields are holding up. We're not doing enough damage." Elias gritted his teeth. "We can't retreat now. We have to keep pushing." The human fleet was still outnumbered, but they weren't about to give up. They had fought too hard and too long to let the Vorgar win now. As the battle raged on, Elias realized that the real victory wasn't about winning the fight itself. It was about proving to the Vorgar that humanity wasn't weak, that they wouldn't back down. They had come from nothing, and now they were standing up to an empire that had thought them insignificant. The Resolute swerved to dodge another blast, and Elias's voice rang out, "Keep fighting. For humanity." The crew responded with fierce determination. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing the universe that the humans would not be cowed. The battle wasn't over yet, but with each passing moment, Elias could feel the shift. The Vorgar were starting to realize that this tiny fleet wasn't so tiny after all. The battle raged on, the nebula around them shimmering with every blast exchanged between the human fleet and the Vorgar dreadnought. The human ships danced in and out of the storm's chaotic currents, using the nebula as a shield. But even with their clever tactics, it was becoming clear the odds were stacked against them. The Vorgar, with their larger, heavily armed ships, were relentless. The Resolute had taken heavy damage, and several of the smaller human ships were barely holding together. Captain Elias Carter watched the situation unfold on his command console. Every second felt like a lifetime. The dreadnought was still intact, its shield holding up despite their best efforts to break through. His mind raced, trying to think of a way to turn the tide in their favor. "We can't keep this up forever," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice grim. "Their shields are too strong. We'll run out of ammunition before we make a dent." Elias took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the controls. He wasn't one to give up, not when so much was at stake. The lives of his crew, the survival of humanity itself, depended on this fight. But the question that lingered in his mind was whether they could outlast the Vorgar, or if they would be forced to retreat. Just then, a new signal blipped on the radar. It was faint at first, barely noticeable among the chaotic signals. Elias leaned forward in his seat, his heart racing. He wasn't sure what he was seeing, but it didn't look like one of their own ships. "Harper, can you make sense of this?" he asked, pointing to the screen. She studied the signal for a moment, her brow furrowing. "I'm not sure, Captain, but it doesn't match any of our known frequencies. It could be an anomaly. Or wait, it's a transmission. An encrypted signal." The hair on the back of Elias's neck stood up. What kind of transmission was this? Could it be another fleet, or worse, another enemy? There was no time to waste. He motioned for Harper to open the channel. The screen flickered for a moment before a strange image appeared. An unfamiliar alien face, its features hard to distinguish through the static. The voice that followed was even more distorted, but it was clear enough to understand. "This is Commander Zorath of the Veridan Fleet," the voice said, crackling with static. "We have received your distress signal. Hold your position. Reinforcements are on the way." Elias's heart skipped a beat. Veridan Fleet. He had never heard of them. Were they allies, or was this some sort of trick? There was no time to waste on second-guessing. He had to trust that the Veridan Fleet was coming to their aid. "Do you copy, Captain?" The voice continued. "Prepare for reinforcements. We will disable the Vorgar's primary weapon and provide support." Elias didn't hesitate. "Acknowledged, Commander. We will hold our position." As the communication ended, Elias quickly issued orders to the fleet. "We hold. Everyone stay in formation. Get ready for backup." The tension in the air was palpable. The human fleet, though outmatched and battered, held their position within the nebula, hoping that the Veridan Fleet would live up to their promise. Time seemed to drag on as the humans waited, hearts pounding, eyes fixed on the enemy. The Vorgar dreadnought continued its assault, firing powerful blasts at the smaller human ships. The Resolute took another hit, its shields flickering as the damage began to take a toll. "They're almost here," Harper said, looking at the radar. "I'm picking up more ships on the edge of the nebula." "It's a large fleet, definitely not ours." Elias nodded. He had no idea who the Veridan Fleet was, But if they were telling the truth, they could be the key to turning this fight around. Focus on dodging, Elias ordered. Don't give them an easy target. As the minutes passed, the human fleet continued to engage the Vorgar, doing their best to maintain pressure while avoiding a full-on collision. The Vorgar, however, were relentless. They pushed forward, seemingly unfazed by the small losses they had suffered. Then, out of nowhere, a flash of light cut through the nebula. A massive ship, twice the size of the largest human vessel, appeared, charging through the storm like a silver bullet. The Veridan fleet had arrived. "Captain, they're here," Harper shouted, her voice full of disbelief and relief. The Veridan ships were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Sleek, with shining metallic hulls, they were far more advanced than the ships the humans had faced before. They moved with purpose, their weapons locking onto the Vorgar dreadnought. Elias watched in awe as their ships opened fire, beams of concentrated energy cutting through the nebula and striking the dreadnought with surgical precision. The Vorgar dreadnought began to falter, its shields crumbling under the Veridan's assault. Elias's heart soared as he watched the massive ship begin to lose power. The battle was no longer in the hands of the aliens. The humans had just gained the upper hand. "We need to finish this," Elias said, his voice steady with resolve. "Harper, fire at their weak spots. Target the dreadnought's engines." The human fleet, now bolstered by the Veridan Reinforcements, closed in on the dreadnought. With coordinated precision, they unleashed everything they had. The Veridan ships fired once more, taking out the dreadnought's remaining shields. It was now or never. "Fire," Elias ordered. The human ships unleashed their final barrage. The dreadnought shuddered as it took hit after hit, and finally, with a thunderous explosion, its engines erupted in flames. The massive ship broke apart, its core destabilizing as the Vorgar crew scrambled to escape. The human fleet had won. The nebula, once filled with the chaos of war, began to settle as the last remnants of the Vorgar fleet retreated. The Veridan ships circled above the human fleet, their presence a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had just formed in the heat of battle. Elias couldn't help but smile, a sense of pride filling him. Humanity had survived, and with the Veridan fleet's unexpected arrival, they had proven to the galaxy that even the smallest fleet could make a difference. "We did it," Harper said softly, her eyes bright with relief. Elias nodded. "Yes, we did. But this isn't the end. This is just the beginning." The victory was overwhelming. The once intimidating Vorgar dreadnought was now nothing more than a broken hull, drifting aimlessly through the remnants of the nebula. Human ships, battered but proud, circled the area, maintaining their watch as the Veridan fleet's advanced ships took their place. There were no more enemy threats in sight. The Vorgar had retreated. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring out at the calm that had settled over the battlefield. The starfield was clear now, with only the soft glow of distant suns and the flicker of dying embers from the battle. The air was filled with the hum of the ship's engines, the crew going about their tasks, but a sense of calm had replaced the once heavy tension. Harper stood beside him, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. "We made it, Captain." Against all odds. Elias didn't immediately respond, his thoughts still with the events that had just unfolded. The humans had faced impossible odds, but they had prevailed. And not only had they shown their strength, but they had also made a new ally in the Veridan fleet, one that was far more advanced than anything humanity could have imagined. It was a game changer. For the first time in ages, Elias felt a flicker of hope. "You did good, Harper," Elias finally said, turning to her with a smile. Everyone did. As he watched the Veridan ships, he realized that this wasn't just about a battle. This victory marked something larger, something more profound. Humanity had just shown the galaxy that they were not a species to be underestimated. Their ingenuity, their willingness to fight, and their determination had won them this victory. But more than that, they had proven that they could survive and thrive. no matter how many obstacles were thrown in their way. Meanwhile, on the command ship of the Veridan fleet, Commander Zoreth stood in front of his crew, watching the scene unfold through the viewing windows. His heart was filled with a sense of respect for the humans. They had shown an incredible amount of courage and skill during the battle. And now, they had earned their place among the stars. "Captain Carter and his fleet are extraordinary," Zoreth said, his voice resonating with pride. "Their determination is something we haven't seen in many of the races we've encountered. Humanity's resilience is unlike any other." One of his officers nodded. "We've seen many species try and fail, but the humans, they fight with everything they have. They are not easily defeated." Zoreth turned to face his crew. "This is why we must stand with them. The Vorgar are not a threat we can ignore. Their reach is vast, and their cruelty knows no bounds. If we are to ensure the survival of the galaxy, humanity must be a part of that effort. We are allies now." The Veridan fleet, advanced and powerful though they were, knew that this war was far from over. The Vorgar were only one threat in a galaxy filled with dangers, and it would take cooperation, unity, and strength to face what was yet to come. And Zoreth believed that humanity, with their spirit, would be the key to victory. Back aboard the Resolute, Elias and Harper were joined by their crew in the war room, where a holographic display showed the status of the fleet. The damage had been severe, but not fatal. They had lost ships, some irreparably damaged, but they had won the fight. And they had gained something even more precious, a partnership with the Veridan fleet. "We've made contact with the Veridans," Harper said, pulling up a new set of data on the screen. "They want to meet in person. They've proposed a summit to discuss future cooperation." Elias glanced at the screen, where a holographic image of Commander Zoreth appeared. "This is it. This is what we've worked for. It's time to build something that will change the galaxy." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of the decision sink in. The future wasn't guaranteed, but this was their chance to make sure humanity had a place in it, a place where they would no longer be seen as weak, as a species destined to be crushed under the boot of others. No, humanity had proven their strength. They had earned their place. "We need to be ready," Elias said, his voice firm. "This is the beginning of something bigger, not just for us, but for everyone." The human fleet, battered but proud, made its way toward the Veridan flagship. The crew was tired, but there was a sense of unity among them. They had done it. They had survived. And now, with their new allies, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the Resolute approached the Veridan flagship, Elias couldn't help but smile. He had seen humanity's potential in every battle, every difficult choice. They had come a long way, but this victory, this moment, was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Elias felt a sense of hope. The galaxy was vast, and it was full of unknowns, but one thing was certain: humanity would no longer stand in the shadows. They were ready to claim their place among the stars. The human fleet, alongside the Veridan ships, would stand united against whatever came next. Together, they would face the darkness of space, not as enemies, but as allies, and that, Elias knew, would be the key to their survival.